So, we've got our guy. I've got a huge cutting rulers. This particular one happens to be the clear view. And I always keep this to scroll. Get myself a little coffee fix. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Quilters Apothecary. Today we are on part 3 of our wonderful kaleidoscope panel piece along. So now our next part is going to be cutting the strips and then cutting our triangles from those strips. Now let me also say I'd like to talk a little bit about what we've done so far. If you haven't seen the first 2 parts, go back and check those out if you want to do this along with us. And then you can start anytime. Again, the videos aren't going away, they're going to be up here. So what we've done so far is we have pressed and trimmed all of the annoying border noise around all of our panels. Remember, we need 7 panels, 6 for cutting and pinning, and then 1 safely put away, folded, and saved for after you finish the first parts. But I always have to remind people, make sure when you fold and put it away in a Ziploc bag so that it doesn't get damaged or anything, you put it in a place that you can find it again, right? I've done that a few times with a few of these that I made. So again, now we have pressed and done all of our pre-prep work, and I have pinned on our last episode all 6 of the cuttable panels. And they are stacked perfectly, they're all lined up, everything's good, we're ready to go. So let's go down, let's take a look at my panels. Your panels, of course, are going to be a bit different. And let's talk a little bit about some of our options here. So, option number 1, I can either cut horizontally or vertically my strips that we will then take and cut into 60-degree triangles. The other option is the size of the strips that we're actually going to use. Now I've already decided that for myself and this particular panel, I'm going to cut mine into 4-inch strips. I know a lot of people will tend to use 3.5 inch, 3 3/4. Sometimes I've seen people use 3. Now on some of the smaller placemat type panels, I've actually seen people, and done it myself, that I had a bird set that was smaller panels that I did 2.5 inches, and that turned out really cool. That being said, on this particular quilt, I'm going to go 4 inches. And let's go down here and look at this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why I've decided on 4-inch strips to start with. This is a large panel, and it's landscape, i.e. it is not long horizontally, it is actually long vertically. I'm sorry, it is long horizontally rather than vertically. And so because of that, it's more of a panorama. And also because of that, what I've realized is I want my hexes to be just a little bit bigger than I might normally do them. Just because the highlight is, of course, this beautiful lion and lamb and this wonderful sky. So there's so much going on in this piece. The noise in this piece, and by noise what I mean is the interesting but unimportant parts of it, are really the little bit of grass that's down here. It's important but not key to the piece. I'm going to have grass in it. It's here, but it's not going to be a priority. For me, the priority again is lion and lamb and these wonderful clouds, which sometimes this is going to be kind of an exception to a lot of the panels out there, because again, there might not be this much of an actual panel that you really want to include in the single panel as you add your kaleidoscopes down the road, a few episodes away here. So because of that, I've decided 4 inches because I want bigger hexagons when it all comes together. And also what I want to do is I'm going to cut mine horizontally. And I've chose horizontally because I know that a lot of the blend out is going to be within these outer clouds. Let me pull this down a little bit so you can see it better. There's a lot to work with here. So I am not just going to attach kaleidoscope blocks to the edge. I'm not going to keep this a square. They're going to be worked into the piece. And so because of that, there's going to be a lot of clouds here. This is going to be a nice size finished piece. If I were to cut vertically, what I feel is when they're pieced together, they won't work properly to fit into and do the blend out, right? But I feel that if I cut horizontally, the blend out is going to be a lot better. And again, does it matter? Possibly not. But I find that it does matter. I've done enough of these to know, I like it when I actually take that into account, whether or not I'm going to go vertical or horizontal with my strips. And again, when I cut these, let's go down here. When I cut these, the area that I'm probably not going to use a lot of the blocks is the actual lamb and lion. I'm mostly going to use the scenery around to do blend out and build out of the block itself. And I'll probably save a lot of this for a future project. That being said, hey, you never know. I might change my mind. But at this point, I know that I'm going to be building it out a little bit. I don't want the lion schnoz or eyes, the lamb schnoz or eyes or any of that really out in the actual quilt. Now I might actually use that up for backing. I might use that to build a backing for this, which we'll see later on down the road when we get that far. But again, in the actual piece itself, I'm probably not going to do that. So one of the important things that you're going to want to do is at this point take a really good look at your panels and consider the lilies. Okay, do I want to cut it vertically, horizontally? What's going to show the best? What's going to give me the best bang for my buck for the triangles that I'm going to be using to build this out? And what parts of this am I probably not going to use? Those are things you kind of want to know ahead of time before you cut. And again, you'll see why as we work through the process of this. So again, let's go down. I've got it all pinned. It's ready to go. And it's stacked as perfect as I can get it. And it's pretty darn good, especially as big as this particular panel is. This is a big one. And so my first step now is to decide where am I going to start from. And again, that is important to me because what did I say the most that I would be using to build it out? The sky is something that I'm going to be using a lot of. So if I were to start down at the bottom in the grass and do my, in my case, 4 inches, 4 inches, 4 inches, 4 inches, 4 inches, I might end up with the top part as not a full 4 inches, and therefore it would be unusable. And that would be a shame to lose 3.5 inches of this top sky. I have at that point lost a major asset in building my art piece, right? So because this is the priority here as opposed to the bottom, I will be starting my cuts and my strips at the top. So I get as many of the clouds and skies that I can possibly get to build that piece out. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is actually start the cutting. So I have my rotary cutter, and I'm chuckling a bit, and I have my 4-inch ruler, and I just happen to have, this is one that we used to produce, It's perfect 4-inch wide. I'm going to use that to cut the long strip. There will be a little sliding along as I cut. And it's one of those things, and I know you all do the same thing. It's like, I remember changing this blade within the last week, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this blade. We want to start with a new sharp blade, and I think this is pretty new. And if you're like me, you're a bit cheap with your blades. So I want to use this thing as long as I can. If I notice I'm starting to get any shredding, then I'll change the blade. I've got blades ready over there. But let's give it a shot first. So now we are here and we are going to start our cutting. I actually went through and made sure that I had enough pins originally in there, because you always kind of want to double check that. So nothing shifts. You don't want to leave too much of a big spot open, because then things will shift and then you'll have to repin them and it can be a nightmare. And you definitely don't want to do that after you pin. I might rearrange some pins, as you're going to see in a minute, but I never want to have to not have an area that gets pinned and things get distorted. So as I look at this, the first thing I want to do is, of course, line up one side. You can either line up the top or you can line this guy up. And I like to go ahead, since I'm going to be cutting horizontal strips, I'm going to line up the side. I want to clean this edge. So I've got my pin cushion I'm going to set aside. I'm going to put this here, and actually I lined up this edge and I made it so that, and I have 3/4 inch tape here. So I'm going to go right to this inch line. That's the reason I don't bring this all the way up here, because then I can't see where I'm at. I'm going to use that inch line as a guide for myself. Put my 3/4 inch, and also I don't slide my ruler right now. I want to set it on there. That way everything is square and in place. And I'm going to go ahead and trim that edge. Okay, and now I am going to pull this towards me. I'm on a giant table right now. I am not tall enough to do that. And then what I'll do is, now I have leeway. I can go ahead, set my ruler right on that edge, line that up. Now I'll go ahead and put that right on the edge. And my ruler is long enough to go right to that point. And I see that what I'm going to need to do is move a few pins. I'm comfortable with the amount of pins that I have in there. I'm not going to distort anything by moving those few pins. Okay, line that up. So I had it a little cattywampus, or the fabric was cattywampus to begin with. There we go. All is well. I'm going to slide this back down. Okay, now I'm going to use that straight line and lined that up so it's nice and straight, right on the line. And I want to double check before I make my first actual cut through. So I'm going to put this on here, and here's why I want to do that. I'm going the whole width of this 4-inch ruler. I'm using that. And as I look at it, I just want to double check. Pin's going to hit here, and that pin's going to hit there. So when I get down there, I will definitely shift that pin. This one, I simply have to pull back a bit. Line that up. There we go. And again, I want to keep this as accurate as possible. Okay. Now I can simply slide this down. I'm going to keep that pin in. And rather than take this out and replace it, I'm going to add a pin. I know everything's stable. And as I work through my rows, this is going to be my process. Now I can pull that pin out. I'm going to check again. We already know this guy is going to be in the way, but I have enough pins. I can just replace that one. Now, I've done the thing, and you can do it as well, where you actually plan your pins exactly in the rows. You could have pre-chalked the top panel when you did your pinning. It's not a bad way to do it. I don't do it that way anymore. And I have to tell you, I like this process. This does not bother me whatsoever. Okay, so now we have our first strip. I'm going to set that aside, and actually I have a quilt rack over here. I'm just going to put it over that, and I'm going to continue that row by row by row by row all the way down to the bottom. Remember, your bottom row is not going to be the exact, unless it's a miracle, exact whatever your measurements. Mine happens to be 4 inches. Yours can be whatever you choose. And I'm just going to continue cutting them row by row by row, taking my time and enjoying the process, and not distorting these little guys. These guys are sacred right now. That means that you want to set them aside gently before we go on to the next step after we finish cutting these strips, which will be cutting our triangles. Okay, so I have all my horizontal strips cut. I'm going to go through how I take these and turn them into the triangles we need for our kaleidoscope blocks. So the ruler that I like to use, if we go down to the table, is a 60-degree. They make a lot of different 60-degree rulers. This particular one happens to be the Clearview, and I always keep this to store it with in a plastic bag, so that way I don't lose my rulers. Actually, I have a bunch of these because I used to not be as organized in my studio, so I'd have to repurchase. So any 60-degree ruler that has a good point, and I know some of them will actually have a little bit of the nub taken off, which is fine. If you use that one, that's fine. I believe that brand is the Creative Grids, I think is it. It's the Checker brand. What's the Checker brand? Creative Grids makes one with the tip already off. I know a lot of people like to use that because it makes it a little easier to piece. I don't use it just because this is what I've always used. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. I know that my strips are 4 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and use a little piece of tape. You can use masking tape. We actually have our other tape, and I'm going to tape right on that 4-inch line. That way I can always see exactly where I need to go so I don't accidentally do a miscut. Also, I'm going to go ahead on the back of this tip of the ruler that I'm cutting on, I'm going to go ahead and put my handy grip, which is a special tape for the back of a ruler so that nothing slides. Let me go grab that and I'll show you what I'm doing. Okay, so I've got my little strip here. I'm not going to put a whole strip. I don't need a gob of stuff on there. I just need a few little pieces of this specific stuff. And I have my Karen K Buckley's, my absolute favorite scissors. It comes in 4 or 5 different sizes. The little red ones are amazing for like cross stitch, needlework stuff, or if you want to use it on your, if you have a long arm or right near your sewing machine, the little red handles are amazing. And in fact, we'll put a little shot of those right here. I love them. They're my absolute favorite snips to take with me everywhere. Okay, so this has peelable top. And there we go. So then there's a piece. I'm going to put that right there. And remember, this will come off when you choose to take it off. Otherwise, it will stay on there and keep that ruler from sticking for months and months and months. I actually have some of this on my long arm quilting rulers that have been on for years. Okay, I'm going to take this one. I think I'll take that to the tip. And that really is all that you need. So again, you can see, got a little glue still on the back of that ruler where it was attached to the paper. You can see slides. Now you can see no slippage as you're cutting, and I absolutely love that. All right, so I am going to use my mat here, of course, just to kind of keep everything nice and straight. I'm going to come over here. I know I'm going to be removing, actually let me take this down a ways. I know I'm going to be removing a few of these pins as I go, so let me just audition. I'm going to take that there, line that up. I'm going to grab a pin. I have everything held in place, and I am simply going to put a pin here. And now I'm going to go ahead and remove these 2 pins. Maybe leave one right there in the corner. And I'm going to start flipping back and forth. Line that up. Sorry about my hat bill, I did turn it around there. Slide that guy up. Line that up. Got my line there, got that there. Everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead. Again, sharp blade, fresh blade if you need to. You're going to be doing a lot of these, and you want everything to be held in place. Now again, I have my tape, which is underneath there, holding that fabric stable. Line that up. Sharp blade is wonderful. And there is my first one with a pin in it. Now I want to do that all the way across. So now I would flip this, line that up. I see that that's going to work just fine. And again, I want it as close as possible. If you're off a scant, you're going to be fine, but try not to be, right? It's going to make the piecing a lot easier when it's not off a scant. But if you're off a scant, you're okay. Just don't keep adding scant upon scant upon scant as you work your way through cutting these triangles. Okay, let's go back down. Okay, so now I want to, because I'm going to run into this pin, I'm simply going to take this, add another pin, that's in place, not distorted. Take this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put another pin there because I want to keep these nice and straight. Put that on there, line that up, And again, I have my sandpaper tabs underneath holding, and we don't want to scooch your ruler. We want to have everything flat and set the ruler directly where it needs to go. And I'm simply going to work my way all the way across, back and forth, and back and forth as I do this. And again, these are going to make amazing blenders, even though there's not a lot of color here, as I piece them to actually blend into the piece and create the outer kaleidoscope around and into your panel. So we're going to continue all the way across. One of the things that I want to add is, as you cut these, you want to make sure, leave a pin in them. I have a couple of friends who, when we were piecing them together, they would take the pins out and keep using them, and what would happen in the pile is then they would get all messed up, and then they'd have to go through and sort all their pieces, which is a nightmare. If you've ever pieced a puzzle, you know that's why most of us don't piece puzzles, because it's not fun. So anyways, just make sure you keep all of them pieced. Again, hold that steady, cut, and like I said, usually I'll have a book on tape. Take my time, enjoy the process. You know, that's the one thing that I would say that we tend to lose sight of. Usually when we're cutting fabric, right? You're cutting out a quilt, and sometimes it just gets a little monotonous and you're not enjoying it. Well, you have to do things that actually make it not so monotonous. And one of my favorite things is, of course, yes, occasionally listening to music, but usually I'm going to be listening to books because I love to read, and it's one of the only times, I can't remember when I actually sat somewhere and read a book on paper. I'm usually working at the long arm, so I've got my audiobooks on. One thing I don't want while I'm cutting something this persnickety is what? The TV in my studio on, unless I'm watching old TV shows that I don't have to keep looking up. The last thing you want to do is to look up when you're using a rotary cutter. So go ahead, finish cutting all of your strips, and again, enjoy the process. Not a time, oh, and always double check to make sure. You flip under like that. Thank goodness that doesn't happen often. And again, what I want to do is I always try to keep my lines straight as I work through. Okay, so that's what you're going to do. You're going to take all the strips back and forth to create our amazing kaleidoscope pieces that we will then talk about what is the next step. Now, obviously, I know some of you are just enjoying this. You've made plenty of these, so you're going to go ahead and do it the way that you've always done it and continue on before the next episode. But my suggestion to you is, if you haven't done this before, wait until the next episode. I've got some tips for you that I think are extremely important. Number one, it's not just slapping them together, pinning, and sewing. I've got some wonderful ways in which I do these, which make my kaleidoscopes look so much better than when I would do it the old way. So, as always, thank you so much for joining me in this piece along. I hope you're having fun, and we will see you on the next episode, and we will then take a look, do some auditioning of our pieces, and then go right into piecing these. And then afterwards, what will happen is, I believe right after that episode, what I think I want to do is to have a live piece along. Because once I show you the process of how I like to sew, I think then the next episode we'll do is just a live one. That way you can join in. If you have any questions for anything up to that point that we've done, then you can ask those questions and enjoy a little bit of time watching us all just piece. All right. Thanks, everybody. As always, thank you for spending your time in my studio. Know you're loved. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other, and we'll see everybody down the road. Goodbye.